Connor Fletcher had always taken pride in his independence. After serving in the military for 2 decades, he had retired to a quiet suburban neighborhood to finally find some peace. His modest, single-story home wasn't extravagant, but to him it represented stability, safety, and freedom, values he had fought hard to protect. The front yard was always well kept, with a neatly trimmed lawn and a small flagpole bearing the American flag. For Connor, the home wasn't just a place to live, it was a sanctuary that reminded him of the life he had built, despite the physical and emotional scars of his service. It was a crisp Monday morning when Connor first noticed the letter in his mailbox. He wasn't the type to get many letters. Most of his correspondence came through email, but this envelope was marked with the official logo of the Homeowner Association. Connor thought little of it at first. The Homeowner Association was known for sending periodic reminders about neighborhood events or small updates to their regulations. He assumed this was one of those routine notices and placed it on his kitchen counter, intending to read it over his morning coffee. Later, as the sunlight poured through the kitchen window, Connor finally opened the envelope. The letterhead was formal, and the tone of the text was sharp and authoritative. It began with a curt introduction. Dear Mr. Fletcher, our records indicate that you have an outstanding balance of $50 in unpaid dues from 2022. As this payment has not been received, your account has accrued additional late fees, and the total balance is now $127.50. Please remit payment within 7 days to avoid further action. Failure to comply will result in the initiation of collections or other measures as outlined in our governing documents. Connor read the letter twice, feeling a sense of confusion mixed with disbelief. He prided himself on being responsible with his finances. Since purchasing the home, he had always paid his homeowner association dues on time, without fail. The claim that he owed money from 2 years prior seemed impossible. Setting the letter down, Connor walked over to the filing cabinet in his home office. He kept meticulous records of all his payments, including homeowner association dues, utility bills, and other expenses. It took him only a few minutes to find the receipts for 2022. As he flipped through the pages, his suspicion was confirmed. He had paid every quarterly homeowner association due on time. There was no record of any missed payment. Feeling reassured, Connor decided to call the homeowner association to resolve the misunderstanding. He dialed the number listed at the bottom of the letter and waited as the phone rang. After several minutes, a curt voice answered, identifying themselves as the homeowner association office manager. Yes, this is Connor Fletcher, he began, keeping his tone polite. I received a letter stating that I have an unpaid balance, but I've checked my records and I can confirm that all my payments were made on time. There must be some kind of mistake. The voice on the other end was cold and dismissive. Mr. Fletcher, our records show an outstanding balance. If you believe this is an error, you can submit proof of payment, but we will not waive the late fees. Connor's patience wavered slightly. I have all my receipts right here. Can I send them to you by email? We only accept proof of payment through certified mail, the manager replied, her tone clipped. It's in the bylaws. And just so you're aware, the late fees will continue to accrue until we receive the full balance. Connor couldn't believe what he was hearing. It was clear that the homeowner association was more interested in enforcing their power than resolving the issue fairly. Frustrated but determined, he spent the next hour drafting a letter, enclosing copies of his receipts, and mailing them to the homeowner association office through certified mail. To ensure there were no delays, he even drove to the post office himself. Over the next few days, Connor tried to put the matter out of his mind. He assumed that once the homeowner association received his letter, they would see the error and close the case. But the incident left a lingering sense of unease. Connor had heard stories from his neighbors about the homeowner association's aggressive tactics. Some had been fined for minor infractions, like leaving their trash cans out for an extra hour or planting flowers that weren't on the approved list. Others had complained about the homeowner association's lack of transparency when it came to financial matters. Still, Connor had never had a direct conflict with them until now. A week passed, and there was no response from the homeowner association. Connor decided to follow up. He called the office again, and after being placed on hold for nearly 20 minutes, he was told that his letter was under review, When he asked for a timeline, the manager simply said, "You'll be notified in writing once a decision has been made." By now, Connor's frustration had turned into suspicion. He started researching homeowner association laws and discovered that, in his state, homeowner associations had significant power when it came to enforcing their rules. They could place liens on properties, impose fines, and even foreclose on homes for unpaid dues. Connor found this alarming, especially given how small the alleged debt was in his case. 2 weeks after sending his letter, Connor received another notice from the homeowner association. This one was even more alarming than the first. It stated that his payment had not been received in time and that his account had been referred to collections. The letter also mentioned the possibility of legal action, including foreclosure, if the balance was not settled immediately. Connor's heart raced as he read the letter. How could this escalate so quickly? He had done everything right. He had sent his proof of payment, followed their procedures, and even paid the disputed amount to avoid further issues. Yet the homeowner association seemed intent on punishing him. That evening, Connor sat at his dining table, surrounded by documents. He had pulled out every receipt, letter, and email he could find related to the homeowner association. Despite his careful record-keeping, it felt like he was fighting an uphill battle. The homeowner association had resources and legal power on their side, while Connor was just one man trying to protect his home. As he sat there, his mind drifted to his military service. He had faced challenges far greater than this life-and-death situations that tested his courage and resolve. But this felt different. This wasn't a battlefield where the enemy was visible. This was a faceless bureaucracy, wielding power under the guise of authority, and it was threatening to take away the one thing he had worked so hard to build. Connor made a promise to himself that night he would not back down. If the homeowner association wanted to take his home, they would have to fight him for it. Little did he know this was just the beginning of a long and arduous battle. Connor Fletcher awoke to the sound of a car door slamming outside his house. It wasn't unusual to hear such noises in his otherwise quiet suburban neighborhood, but something about this morning felt different. As he stepped outside to retrieve his mail, he noticed 2 strangers standing across the street, both holding cameras and pointing them in his direction. He frowned, feeling a mix of irritation and unease. "Can I help you?" he called out, his voice steady but laced with suspicion. One of the men, a middle-aged man in a suit, looked up from his camera. "Just taking photos for a listing," he said nonchalantly, before turning back to focus on Connor's house. "What listing?" Connor asked, his tone sharper now. The man hesitated, exchanging a glance with his companion. "The homeowner association foreclosure auction. This property is up for sale next week," he replied, as if it were the most ordinary thing in the world. Connor's heart sank. He felt the blood drain from his face as the words registered. "What are you talking about?" "This is my house. It's not for sale," he said firmly, taking a step closer. The man shrugged, clearly uninterested in Connor's protest. "You'll need to take it up with the homeowner association. We're just here on behalf of the buyer." Connor didn't wait to hear more. He stormed back into his house, his mind racing. How could this be happening? He had done everything the homeowner association asked. He had paid the disputed amount, sent proof of payment, and followed every procedure they had outlined. Yet now, his home was being advertised as part of a foreclosure auction. Connor spent the next few hours calling the homeowner association's office. Each time he was placed on hold or transferred to someone else who claimed they couldn't provide details about his case. Finally, after nearly an hour of persistence, he was connected to a representative. "Mr. Fletcher, we sent you multiple notices regarding your unpaid dues and the consequences of non-payment," the representative said in a rehearsed, monotone voice. "Unfortunately, since the balance was not resolved in a timely manner, the foreclosure process has already begun." "I did resolve it," Connor shouted, his frustration boiling over. "I sent proof of payment weeks ago, and I even paid the disputed amount just to make sure this wouldn't happen. You've made a mistake, and now you're trying to take my home." "The payment you sent was received after the deadline," the representative replied coldly. "As per our bylaws, the homeowner association reserves the right to foreclose on properties with outstanding balances." Connor was speechless. The bureaucratic language, the lack of accountability, it was like talking to a wall. "This is my home," he said finally, his voice cracking. "You can't just take it from me over $50. Our hands are tied, Mr. Fletcher. The process is already in motion. You'll need to consult with legal counsel if you wish to contest the foreclosure." Connor hung up the phone, his hands shaking. He had heard horror stories about homeowner associations abusing their power, but he never thought he'd become one of their victims. His home, the place he had worked so hard to maintain, the place where he felt safe, was being ripped away from him over a technicality. And the worst part, it seemed perfectly legal. Determined to fight back, Connor spent the rest of the day gathering every piece of documentation he had related to the dispute. He pulled out receipts, bank statements, certified mail confirmations, anything that could prove he had fulfilled his obligations. With a thick folder of evidence in hand, he made an appointment with a local attorney who specialized in homeowner association disputes. The following day, Connor met with Sarah Bennett, a sharp, no-nonsense attorney who came highly recommended by one of his neighbors. Sarah listened intently as Connor explained the situation, occasionally nodding and jotting down notes. "This isn't the first time I've dealt with cases like this," Sarah said when Connor finished. "Homeowner associations often push the limits of their authority, especially when it comes to foreclosures. Unfortunately, in our state, the law gives them a lot of power. But that doesn't mean they're untouchable." Connor felt a glimmer of hope. "So what can we do?" he asked. Sarah leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. "First, we'll file an emergency injunction to stop the auction. That will buy us some time to gather more evidence and build your case. Then, we'll look for procedural errors. Homeowner associations are notorious for cutting corners when it comes to legal processes. If we can prove they violated their own bylaws or state law, we can challenge the foreclosure." Connor nodded, his resolve strengthening. "I'm willing to do whatever it takes," he said. The next week was a whirlwind of activity. Sarah filed the injunction, which temporarily halted the auction, and began digging into the homeowner association's records. Connor, meanwhile, contacted local media outlets to share his story. He believed that public pressure could help expose the homeowner association's misconduct and prevent them from targeting others. Within days, a local news station picked up the story. A reporter visited Connor's home to film an interview, during which he recounted his ordeal. "I've always paid my dues on time," he said, standing in front of the flagpole in his yard. "This isn't about money, it's about power. The homeowner association is using its authority to bully residents, and it needs to stop." The segment aired that evening, sparking outrage among viewers. Neighbors began sharing their own experiences with the homeowner association, painting a picture of an organization more interested in profit than community. One resident revealed that several homes in the neighborhood had been foreclosed on in recent years, often under questionable circumstances. Another claimed that the homeowner association president had ties to a real estate investor who frequently purchased foreclosed properties at discounted prices. Despite the mounting support, Connor knew the fight was far from over. The homeowner association responded to the media attention with a statement defending their actions. "We regret the unfortunate circumstances surrounding Mr. Fletcher's case," the statement read, "but the homeowner association is obligated to enforce its bylaws and maintain the financial stability of the community. All actions taken were in accordance with state law." Connor was disgusted by their blatant disregard for the truth, but he refused to let their tactics intimidate him. With Sarah by his side and a growing wave of public support, he felt more determined than ever to expose the corruption at the heart of the homeowner association. The legal battle ahead would be grueling, but Connor was ready. For him, this wasn't just about saving his home, it was about standing up for himself and everyone else who had been wronged by those who abused their power. Connor Fletcher's legal battle against the homeowner association officially began the day Sarah Bennett filed an injunction to halt the foreclosure auction. While the auction was temporarily paused, Connor knew the fight was far from over. The homeowner association wasn't just a faceless entity, it was a powerful organization backed by a team of lawyers and years of legal precedent. But Connor wasn't going to let them win without a fight. With Sarah's guidance, he prepared to take on the organization that had turned his life upside down. Sarah wasted no time. Over the following weeks, she began dissecting the homeowner association's governing documents, including their bylaws, financial statements, and foreclosure policies. Connor spent hours by her side reviewing records and highlighting inconsistencies. It wasn't long before they uncovered troubling patterns. "I think we've got something here," Sarah said one evening, pointing to a section in the homeowner association's financial disclosures. "Look at this. Over the past 2 years, they've initiated foreclosures on more than a dozen properties, all for debts under $200. That's not normal. Most homeowner associations try to work with homeowners to resolve minor debts, but this one seems to jump straight to foreclosure." Connor leaned in to read the document. "And look at the timing," he added. "These foreclosures always happen just before the properties are sold to the same buyer, Clear Ridge Investments." Sarah nodded. "Clear Ridge Investments," she repeated. "That's the real estate company we saw linked to the homeowner association president in those emails you uncovered. This might not just be about enforcing dues, it could be about profit." The discovery was a turning point. Connor and Sarah now had a theory: the homeowner association was intentionally targeting homeowners with minor debts, fast-tracking foreclosures, and selling the properties to a connected investor at discounted prices. But proving it would require more evidence. Connor reached out to his neighbors, many of whom had shared their frustrations with the homeowner association during the media coverage of his story. He organized a community meeting at his home, inviting anyone who had experienced issues with the organization. More than 20 people showed up, filling Connor's living room and spilling out onto the front porch. One by one, they shared their stories. A retired teacher named Margaret recounted how she was fined $500 for planting flowers that weren't on the approved list, and when she couldn't pay the fine, the homeowner association threatened foreclosure. A young couple, Ethan and Rachel, revealed that they had almost lost their home over a $75 late fee, narrowly avoiding foreclosure by borrowing money from family. "What about Clear Ridge Investments?" Sarah asked, addressing the group. "Has anyone here heard of them?" Several hands went up. "They bought my neighbor's house after the homeowner association foreclosed on it," Margaret said. "It was sold for half its market value." Connor felt a surge of anger. This wasn't just about him, this was a systematic effort to exploit the residents of their neighborhood. With the community's support, he and Sarah began compiling testimonies, gathering documents, and piecing together a timeline of events that painted a damning picture of corruption and greed. The day of the hearing arrived, and Connor walked into the courthouse with Sarah by his side. The courtroom was packed, with many of Connor's neighbors there to show their support. On the opposite side of the room sat the homeowner association's legal team, 3 well-dressed attorneys who looked as though they had done this 100 times before. Sarah presented their case with confidence. She outlined the homeowner association's pattern of targeting homeowners with minor debts, highlighted the suspicious connection to Clear Ridge Investments, and argued that the foreclosure on Connor's home was not only unjust but part of a larger scheme. "This isn't about maintaining the community," Sarah said, her voice steady and firm. "This is about profit. The homeowner association has weaponized its bylaws to exploit residents, and my client is one of many victims." The homeowner association's lead attorney countered with the same arguments they had used in their public statements. They insisted that the foreclosure was legal, that Connor had failed to pay his dues on time, and that the organization was simply enforcing its rules to protect the financial stability of the neighborhood. But Sarah wasn't finished. She introduced the emails linking the homeowner association president to Clear Ridge Investments and called Margaret and Ethan as witnesses to testify about their experiences. The evidence was compelling, and the judge seemed increasingly skeptical of the homeowner association's claims. While the legal battle played out in court, the story continued to gain traction in the media. Local news outlets covered the trial extensively, and Connor became something of a local hero. His willingness to stand up to the homeowner association inspired others to come forward with their own stories, further exposing the organization's unethical practices. National media soon picked up the story, turning it into a broader conversation about the unchecked power of homeowner associations. Connor was invited to speak on a popular morning show, where he shared his journey and called for reform. "This isn't just about my home," he said during the interview. It's about holding these organizations accountable. Homeowner associations shouldn't have the power to destroy lives over a few dollars. The public outcry put additional pressure on the homeowner association. Residents began attending board meetings in droves, demanding transparency and accountability. Some even called for the resignation of the homeowner association president. As the trial neared its conclusion, Sarah received a tip from a former homeowner association employee who had seen the media coverage. The whistleblower provided internal documents that confirmed what Connor and Sarah had suspected all along. The homeowner association had been intentionally targeting homeowners with minor debts to fast-track foreclosures and sell the properties to Clear Ridge Investments at below-market prices. The documents also revealed that the homeowner association president had received kickbacks from the investor for each property sold. The new evidence was a bombshell. Sarah quickly filed a motion to introduce the documents into the trial, and when the judge reviewed them, he called for an immediate recess to consider their implications. Connor sat in the courthouse hallway, his hands trembling as he clutched a cup of coffee. The weight of the past few months bore down on him, but for the first time he felt a glimmer of hope. If the judge ruled in their favor, it wouldn't just mean saving his home, it would mean exposing the homeowner association's corruption and protecting his neighbors from further exploitation. When the judge finally reconvened, he delivered a stern rebuke to the homeowner association. The evidence presented today raises serious questions about the integrity of this foreclosure process, he said. Until these questions are resolved, the foreclosure on Mr. Fletcher's property is hereby nullified. Connor felt tears welling up in his eyes. It wasn't a final victory, but it was a step in the right direction. With the community rallying behind him, the media shining a spotlight on the case, and Sarah's unwavering determination, he knew the fight wasn't over, but he also knew he wasn't alone. Connor Fletcher walked into the courthouse for what he hoped would be the final hearing in his grueling battle against the homeowner association. It had been months of stress, late nights and financial strain, but Connor felt a renewed sense of determination. The judge's previous decision to nullify the foreclosure had been a temporary reprieve, but the homeowner association had doubled down, denying all allegations of wrongdoing and refusing to take accountability. For Connor, this final chapter was about more than just saving his home. It was about justice, not only for himself but for his entire community. The turning point in Connor's case had been the whistleblower, a former employee of the homeowner association who provided damning evidence of corruption. The internal documents revealed that the homeowner association's president, Mark Reynolds, had orchestrated a scheme with Clear Ridge Investments. The homeowner association deliberately targeted homeowners with minor debts, fast-tracked foreclosures, and sold the properties to Clear Ridge Investments at discounted prices. In return, Reynolds received financial kickbacks. Sarah Bennett, Connor's attorney, had spent weeks meticulously preparing to present this evidence in court. The whistleblower, a woman named Lisa Porter, had agreed to testify despite fears of retaliation. Lisa's testimony would be critical, as it not only confirmed the fraudulent practices of the homeowner association, but also exposed the personal greed and corruption of its leadership. As Connor sat in the courtroom, the atmosphere was tense. The homeowner association's legal team appeared composed, but their confidence seemed to waver as Sarah began her presentation. She opened by introducing the whistleblower's documents, detailing the pattern of abuse and greed that had plagued the community for years. "Your Honor," Sarah began, her voice steady and clear, "this case is not just about a single foreclosure. It is about a systematic abuse of power. The homeowner association, under Mark Reynolds' leadership, has betrayed the trust of this community. They have weaponized their bylaws to prey on vulnerable homeowners, profiting from their suffering. Today we intend to prove that their actions were not only unethical but illegal." Sarah called Lisa Porter to the stand. The room fell silent as Lisa recounted her experiences working for the homeowner association. She described how Reynolds had instructed employees to flag minor debts for foreclosure, often bypassing normal procedures to expedite the process. Lisa also testified about meetings where Reynolds and representatives from Clear Ridge Investments discussed upcoming foreclosures and the resale of properties. "I knew it was wrong," Lisa said, her voice trembling but resolute. "But I was afraid to speak out. When I saw what they were doing to Mr. Fletcher and others, I couldn't stay silent anymore. The homeowner association's lawyers attempted to discredit Lisa, questioning her motives and suggesting she was acting out of spite. But Sarah was prepared, presenting corroborating evidence from the whistleblower's documents that backed up Lisa's claims. The judge listened intently, occasionally glancing at the homeowner association's attorneys, who seemed increasingly unsettled. Sarah then called several of Connor's neighbors to testify. Margaret, the retired teacher, shared her story of being fined and threatened with foreclosure over trivial issues. Ethan and Rachel, the young couple, described their near miss with losing their home. Each testimony painted a vivid picture of a community living in fear of an organization that was supposed to protect them. Homeowners shouldn't have to live in constant fear of losing their homes over minor infractions, Ethan said. This isn't about maintaining the neighborhood, it's about control and profit. The courtroom murmured in agreement as more neighbors came forward to share their experiences. Connor felt a swell of pride and gratitude for the community's support. Their courage and willingness to stand together against injustice had transformed his personal fight into a collective movement. After days of testimony and arguments, it was time for the judge to deliver his verdict. Connor sat in the front row, his hands clasped tightly together, as the judge addressed the courtroom. The evidence presented in this case is deeply troubling, the judge began. The homeowner association's actions were not only unethical but indicative of a broader pattern of abuse and corruption. This court finds that the foreclosure on Mr. Fletcher's property was conducted in bad faith and in violation of both state law and the homeowner association's own bylaws. The judge paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the room. Therefore, I am ruling in favor of Mr. Fletcher. The foreclosure is permanently voided, and the homeowner association is ordered to return full ownership of the property to Mr. Fletcher. Furthermore, the homeowner association will pay damages to Mr. Fletcher for the emotional and financial harm caused by their actions. Connor exhaled deeply, relief washing over him like a wave. But the judge wasn't finished. In addition, I am referring this case to the State Attorney General's office for further investigation into potential criminal conduct by the homeowner association and its leadership. It is my hope that this case will serve as a wake-up call to all homeowner associations to act with integrity and fairness. The courtroom erupted in applause as the verdict was announced. Connor turned to Sarah, shaking her hand and thanking her for her tireless work. "You saved my home," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I couldn't have done this without you." Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered to interview Connor and Sarah. The story had garnered national attention, and the verdict was hailed as a victory for homeowners everywhere. Connor used the opportunity to advocate for legislative reform, calling on lawmakers to impose stricter regulations on homeowner associations and limit their foreclosure powers. "This isn't just about me," Connor said during an interview. "It's about protecting families and communities from organizations that abuse their authority. No one should lose their home over something as minor as a $50 debt." The fallout for the homeowner association was swift and severe. Mark Reynolds resigned in disgrace and faced criminal charges for his role in the foreclosure scheme. Clear Ridge Investments also came under scrutiny, with investigators uncovering evidence of widespread fraud. The homeowner association was forced to implement sweeping reforms, including greater transparency, stricter oversight, and limits on their foreclosure practices. For Connor, the victory was bittersweet. The months of stress and uncertainty had taken a toll, but he emerged from the ordeal stronger and more determined than ever. His home, once a symbol of stability, now represented resilience and hope. In the weeks following the trial, Connor's neighbors rallied together to rebuild their community. They formed a new homeowner association board, composed of residents committed to fairness and accountability. Connor was elected as the board's vice president, a role he accepted with humility and determination. "This isn't just my victory," Connor said during the board's first meeting. "It's ours. Together we can make this neighborhood a place where everyone feels safe and respected." As Connor sat on his porch one evening, watching the sun set over his quiet street, he felt a profound sense of peace. The battle had been long and difficult, but justice had prevailed, and for the first time in months, he felt truly at home.